Hello, Namaskar, Vanakkam. I hope all of you are doing well. A considerable spec by Robert Frost, which is part of the Treasure Chest ICSE Class 10 English Literature syllabus. That's a poem that we are going to discuss in absolute detail. Before I start, a couple of info points quickly. The short notes for this particular poem, as is the case also with the other poems and stories of Treasure Chest, will be published gradually on our Instagram and WhatsApp channels. Both are called Study with Sudhir. Okay. The link for the WhatsApp channel I have been putting at various places. I may put it in the description box for this one also. So please do have a look at the description box or the pinned comment. Okay. I put it in one of the community posts also in the month of May 2024. That's as far as the short notes are concerned. There are no short notes for Julius Caesar, however. Okay. So you will need to listen to the explanation videos, which are in great detail. The reason for that is that a lot of things I say extempore while explaining. So it would really make sense for you to note it down while you're listening to the videos. It's a one-time effort, really. Point number 2, the sample question papers should be out sometime in the month of August, September 2024, and every subsequent year around the same month. I would strongly advise you not to spend your money on PYQs, at least for English literature, for the simple reason that the format has changed, the syllabus has changed, right? So it wouldn't make sense, at least not for the 2025 batch. Subsequent years will get only 1 year question papers, so it may not really make much sense. So question banks and PYQs not so much, but sample papers definitely. Okay, so those will be out. And I would strongly urge you to have a look at them because they will prepare you with the exact format of the specimen paper in mind. Okay, so let's now get started now that I have put out the information points. Okay, so about the poet, the note which is there, please always have a look at it. You may not get questions directly from it, but it always helps to understand the context in which Robert Frost wrote this particular poem. Now, Robert Frost was one of the foremost poets that English literature has known, especially in the 20th century. And his poetry at first glance was simple, as you would realize in this particular poem. But that simplicity was deceptive because he would make a larger point beyond what the simple poem would actually seem to be conveying. You understand? So he wrote on complex themes in an easy to understand language. And that was the beauty of Robert Frost's poetry. So what he would observe would be the very ordinary things in life, in day-to-day life. But then he would take out some extraordinary meaning from it. That's the beauty of Frost's poetry. So his poems, as a result, became very rich in texture. Please use these kind of phrases that I've written here because that would help make your answers look that much better. It had several layers of meaning. Now, much of his poetry was written around rural life in New England, which is near New York. And he won 4 Pulitzer Prizes for poetry, which is the ultimate prize as far as literature is concerned. There is, of course, the Nobel Prize also for literature, but Pulitzer is considered as significant and important. Now, what's a poem about? Now, this is the mite about which the poem has been written. Okay, now this is a mite, which is, one of the insects that you would find in a day-to-day thing. So this is what it looks like. Now, it's an observation of a tiny insect called the mite. And the poet discovers that the most insignificant insect on a sheet of paper while he is writing, presumably. And initially, you realize that the insect kind of panics and it attempts to escape the poet. But it is only when the mite moves that the poet realizes that the speck is actually a living mite. It's not a dead insect. And he follows its very desperate actions with interest as he realizes that the mite has a mind of its own. It's a thinking creature. It's not a non-thinking, dumb imbecile. It is a thinking creature, and he saves the life of the mite. He doesn't kill the mite, And the poet explains why he did so, and it's a pointer to respecting life, reverence for life. Understanding that the life of that tiny little mite, tiny little insect is also equally significant. That's the one of the larger messaging of the poem. Now, what Frost does is to use the mite. The poem is about the mite, but he uses the mite to convey the insignificance of human life. Just like before us, the mite on a sheet of paper looks like an insignificant creature. We also, in the larger universe, with so many stars and planets and meteors and asteroids and stars and so many other human beings and animal kingdom and plant species around us, what are we? We are an insignificant mite. Isn't that so? Which is why I always say, don't take yourself so seriously. You are just an insignificant creature in this larger universe. Of course, you can do big things, but in the larger scheme of things, all of us, you, me, everyone, is an insignificant creature. So never the message that I take personally is, at a personal level, never to treat oneself with too much of importance. I see how people give themselves title that I am so and so. Okay, I don't want to name anyone right here. I am so and so, wanting to make themselves feel very important. But that's never the case, because in the larger scheme of things, each one of us is rather insignificant. So through this metaphor, Frost is highlighting the need for humility, the need to stay grounded, the need to have your feet on the ground, the need not to fly high, the need not to feel proud at any point in life. Okay, so that's what Frost is trying to convey. And he also, obviously, the poem also conveys and highlights the poet's fascination with just such a small form of life. So this is what it would have looked like. I created this image. Just see, it's quite fascinating. So in the handwriting, while he's writing, that's when he finds his mite. And of course, this one has shown a mite rather big. It's actually a very, very tiny insect. Okay. So it's a fascinating poem. So, and I'm sure you would enjoy the use of the word speck, because it kind of emphasizes the minute size. Speck itself conveys minuteness, size of the creature. So this is important, and draws our attention to the details of the natural world that we often overlook. Thus, it explores the theme of the power of observation, important, the theme of existence, which I just now spoke about, the theme of morality, of being killed or death or life. Frost's encounter with the mite makes him question his own place in the universe and the interconnectedness of all living beings. One of the sidelights which I found during my research is that when this poem was published, it was also the time for many scientific advancements. Microscopes had then revealed previously unseen creatures, and that challenged traditional notions of size and existence. So there seems to be some kind of the scientific element also in this particular poem. Now let's get into the poem. A speck that would have been beneath my sight on any but a paper sheet so white, set off across what I had written there, and I had idly poised my pen in air. So there is a rhyme scheme also, which I would talk about later in the video. Now, speck is a very small spot or piece. Okay, a small spot or piece. Okay, that's what the word speck conveys. Beneath my sight suggests that it was too small or too insignificant to be noticed by me. Set off means started to move. It started to move. He set off for the school. He set off for the shop. So means that he started to move towards a school or towards a shop. So the poet is saying that the speck was so small that it would not be noticed by me, except for the fact that it was in a sense of contrast against the white sheet of paper. So it got noticed. If it was white in color, he may have completely overlooked it. He may have not noticed it at all. So the speck began to move across the paper on which the poet had written. Now, the deeper meaning of these three sentences is that, one, please keep noting it down. All these things, the explanation of the poem line by line, you need to note it down. The short notes would convey what I have told you just at the beginning and at the end of the poem about the themes of the poem. The speck is insignificant on its own, but it becomes noticeable because of the whiteness of the paper. So this is a metaphor for how small things can become important if they are seen in a particular context. I repeat, small things can become significant, important, if they are seen in a certain context. I'll give you an example, which is why I'm not giving you these notes, because I speak a lot more extra than what this scribbling that I've done out here. You may be going through a bad time. At that point, some friend of yours comes and says something nice to you. He's polite to you. He kind of listens to your problem. He gives you advice which you find very useful. Now, it may be a very small thing for that person to do for you, but in the context of your frame of mind at that particular time, it may be very important, because that advice that your friend gave you may actually prove to be a game changer, may actually motivate you to come out of that negative frame of mind and do something which you thought otherwise may not have been possible. So you see, everything is in a particular context. Okay. So the poet is focusing intently on his writing, as we know, but even the smallest distraction seems to be enough to break his concentration. His concentration has been broken as a result of the movement of the might that he has discovered on that white sheet of paper. So this is also the second point I want to make note of, is that this is a pointer to how life usually is, where we get distracted. Suddenly there is a beep on your phone, some notification has come and you get distracted. You want to go and check your Instagram then and there. You want to check your WhatsApp then and there. So that's a distraction. Similarly, here also, he has got distracted as a result of the movement of that small thing. And I had idly poised my pen in air and to stop it with a period of ink. So let's look next at line 4 and 5. Idly means to without any purpose. Okay, it means without any purpose. Poised my air, pen in the air means I held my pen in the air like this to stop it with a period of ink. Now, period is, in American English, it is used almost like a punctuation mark, like a full stop, to mark the end of the sentence. It's like a full stop, period of ink. So these lines convey that the speaker's initial impulse was to kill the tiny speck with a simple dot of ink from the pen. You put, if I don't know if your generation would have used a fountain pen ink, fountain ink pen. That's what we used when we were in school. My generation, your parents' generation. So you put the pen and that would kind of get drowned in it. So the idly suggests that he was simply holding his pen when he saw the speck move, while poised here, the word poised here indicates that the pen was ready to be, you say, the army was poised to attack the enemy. Means it is in a state of preparedness. It is absolutely battle ready. So it was, poised conveys that feeling that, he wanted to use the pen as a weapon of a kind. And this hints at very sharp kind of action. To stop it with a period of ink is a metaphor, because the poet Robert Frost has used the word period to suggest that he wants to use the ink to stop the speck, stop the peck with the ink, with the drop of ink, in order to end its life, which is why I said the use of the word period, which in American English is used to end a sentence. So here he's talking about with a period of ink in order to convey that he wanted to end its life. So it's an expression of the power of the human being, of the poet in this particular case, that, it only takes it, just one drop and he can finish off the life of that little mite. So initially, the poet wanted to eliminate, to kill the mite, and the period of ink, in a way, is to lighten up. I mean, you could say to add a dash of humor, or at least to make it lighthearted to what is otherwise a violent act, because you're taking someone's life, or you're making it difficult for the mite to survive. So that is what is a violent act. Let's assume that someone comes and puts a plastic cover around your face and does not allow you to breathe. It's a violent act because it could take your life if the plastic cover is not removed for a minute or so. Isn't that so? It may seem humorous to someone else, but it is an extremely violent act. The same would, so think, I want you students to think from the point of view of the mite. You are a little mite, someone comes and puts a blob of blue ink or black ink on you, and you find it difficult to survive because you're not able to escape that viscous liquid. So it is, in that sense, a very violent act. What did you do to harm him? You are just going across the paper. You didn't know that the paper belonged to him. You didn't know that you are trespassing on what is his property. So I want you to think like that. Think of this big man and you think of the mite. Okay, interesting, no? Acha lag raha hai. Maza aaya. When something strange about it made me think, this was no dust speck by my breathing blown, but unmistakably a living mite with inclinations it could call its own. So he says unmistakably means clearly, without any doubt, undoubtedly. Okay. And mite is an insect, a spider-like insect. I just shown you the photograph, so you now have an idea about what it looks like. So these lines 6 to 9, mark a turning point in the poet's mindset, and also the perception, his perception of the mite. He stops when he notices something unusual. Strange means something unusual. This means something unusual. He notices something unusual about the mite. The strange part caught his attention, that it was not an inanimate particle of dust which was moving as a result of his breathing while he was writing or thinking. My breathing blown implies that it is much smaller and lighter than the dust, and it's easily affected by a slight breeze or even the breathing out from his nostrils. So he now realizes that it is a living creature, a mite, and the mite also seems to have a mind of its own with inclinations it could call its own, which shows that it has a mind of its own desires, its own preferences. Inclinations means preferences. Okay. Inclinations means its own preferences, whether it wants to move left or right or straight. So that kind of elevates the stature of the mind. It's not just some small insect, dumb imbecile. Imbecile means stupid. It seems to have a mind and preferences of its own, and that this kind of leads on to a more interesting and an emphatic interaction between the poet and the mite. Now here, the word mite is also what is called a homonym or a homophone. Homophone or homonym, because the pronunciation of mite and might are both the same. Why? I should increase the size. Sorry, I thought I had increased the size. I don't know why it's okay. So I decreased it, then I didn't increase it. Okay. So the pronunciation of mite is the same as that of might. This is known as homophones or homonyms. The interesting part, which I thought was, it's very ironic because the word might conveys the complete opposite meaning of mite. Mite is small, tiny, powerless. Might conveys power, authority. है ना? I thought it was quite interesting. It paused as with suspicion of my pen and then came racing wildly on again to where my manuscript was not yet dry. Lines 10 to 12. What do they convey? So now he's talking about the movement of the mite. He says manuscript is the what the poet is writing by hand, what I showed you in the photograph above. So the mite seems rather suspicious or very wary of the pen because it's like a weapon that could end its life. So the mite is wary and suspicious of the pen, and it observes it very closely, and then it resumes its very frantic movement because he sees the pen as a weapon and the person as an enemy, obviously. So it kind of runs towards that side of the manuscript, that side of the page, where the ink was not yet dry. Okay. Now there is the use of the poetic device of personification out here, in the manner in which the Speck seems to pause, as if sensing danger from the pen of the speaker, racing wildly. Again, it's a very human being kind of a personification, right? Racing wildly emphasizes the fear factor, the fear element, and a desperate attempt to escape from the pen. And the next line describes the destination of the Speck, through where my manuscript was not yet dry. Okay, so the area on the paper where the speaker's writing ink had not completely dried, unknowingly or knowingly, it kind of rushes in that direction. So it shows that the Speck sees the pen as some kind of a threat and it's trying to flee. Wahan pe likh diya hai, so wahan pe nahi jayega. So it goes in that direction. So it shows what? It shows that the mite has a very strong survival instinct. Please use this in your answers. This phrase, survival instinct. Then paused again and either drank or smelt with loathing, for again it turned to fly. Lines 13 and 14. Now this is the second pause of the mite. This was pause number 1. This is pause number 2. So it shows what? It shows that it is a very careful kind of personality. That it is, it's kind of seeing ki kahan jaane se main bach paunga, where I'll be absolutely 100% safe. So it shows his careful personality, and it pauses to smell or drink the ink. Loathing means it did not like it. Loathing means you take a dislike or aversion to something. And in fact, it found it disgusting. Loath is an extreme form of dislike. It's a negative reaction. So it dislikes it so much that it immediately turns to fly. Okay. Now, the poet is not sure whether it actually just smelt it or drank the ink. So it kind of also shows the poet's limitations in understanding the movements or actions of the insect, of the tiny insect. And he thinks it has moved away because the ink is an unpleasant kind of a smell or taste, or maybe it sensed danger. He doesn't know. So it's moved to fly away, to flee from there, underlines once again its survival instinct, which is why I said this particular phrase, survival instinct, is extremely significant. Lines 15 to 18. Plainly with an intelligence I dealt, it seemed too tiny to have room for feet, yet must have had a set of them complete to express how much it didn't want to die. So now, plainly with an intelligence I dealt means that the poet is interacting with the Speck on a level of understanding. Intelligence suggests that he recognizes the Speck's actions as motivated by a desire to survive, to live on. And this is a shift, because initially he had thought it was an insignificant Speck, but now he calls it, the title is what? A considerable Speck, which means it is something of importance. So now he's looking at it as a creature of intelligence. Okay, so plainly with an intelligence I am dealing with it. He's no longer talking about it as some insignificant tiny thing. It seemed too tiny to have room for feet. So this kind of highlights the physical limitations the speaker perceives in the space, because after all, it's a tiny insect. So it is so small that the idea of having feet itself, he finds it very absurd. इतना छोटा है, उसकी टांगे भी हैं, so he finds that quite strange. Yet must have had a set of them complete. Yet it obviously has feet, which is why it is able to move from one part of the page to another part of the page. So despite its limitations, the poet acknowledges the necessity of movement in order to survive. Only when it has the ability to move from place A to place B can it survive. If it stays at place A, it is in a vulnerable spot. It can be killed. The phrase set of them complete emphasizes that even though unseen, the speck possesses the tools, which are its feet, which it needs in order to fulfill the desire to live on. So the set is complete. They may not be visible to the eyes of the poet, but they are the necessary tools in order to ensure that the speck survives. To express how much it did not want to die. So here, this particular line, the 18th line, it connects all the points that he's talking in the lines 15, 16, and 17. To express how much it did not want to die, it shows the speck's, the mite's frantic movements, despite its impossible physical limitations. After all, those tiny legs, how fast will they move, are all expressions of the strong will to live, to survive. So the speaker now respects the mite's intelligence and the fight for survival. And even though it is very tiny and very limited in its movements, it possesses the tools, the unseen feet, in order to survive and live on. It ran with terror and with cunning crept. It faltered. I could see it hesitate. Then in the middle of the open sheet, cowered down in desperation to accept whatever I accorded it of fate. So this is the culmination of the mite's attempt to survive. So it ran with terror, okay, and with cunning crept. Now it shows that the poet is now very closely observing the way it is trying to escape, the survival tactics. It is, he's kind of looking very closely. It is showing his very close observation and the survival tactics of the mite. Ran with terror highlights its fear, which it is obviously fear. Cunning crept suggests a more strategic approach. There is fear, but at the same time, it is also having a very strategic approach. Because simply running may not be an option. So it wants to decide where it wants to go to. So it kind of conveys what? I'm having a pain in the rib cage. So it kind of conveys that, it was using its mind on escaping to which part of the page would be the safest option. It faltered. I could see it hesitate. He says that here the speck's lack of options or some kind of hesitation seems to be very obvious. It is evident to Robert Frost. Faltered means stumbled, fumbled. That, it's like as if it's losing strength, as if it is losing stamina, and it can no longer maintain its frantic pace. After all, it's a tiny insect. How fast could its legs move? The unseen legs. So hesitate implies a moment of uncertainty, as though it is kind of thinking about its next move. Then in the middle of the open sheet, this is kind of giving the location where it is. It is in the middle of the open sheet. And when you are in the middle, you are in a sense exposed and vulnerable. Any moment, the poet can do anything to you. So you are extremely weak and exposed and vulnerable in the vast emptiness of that white sheet of paper. An open sheet emphasizes that there is no place to hide. It is completely open. It's like a barren land. It's like you are in the middle of a desert and something can come and strike you immediately, right? So there is no escape route. There is no hiding place. That's what the open sheet conveys. The middle again makes you feel very vulnerable. Cover down in desperation to accept. Means to cover means, you tum jhuk jao in order to kind of, almost feel like, I don't want to be seen. So you're cowering down, and it is an expression, a physical manifestation of fear, that you are scared. So because you want to look smaller in order not to be this thing. वो होता था ना, the teacher asks a question. Someone who is sitting on the fourth bench or the fifth bench immediately would go down like this so that the teacher cannot see you, and asks in that, okay, roll number 24, you answer the question. That is not being done, right? So that kind of a thing. So it's kind of cowering down. So so that you don't get noticed. Desperation is a state of despair which can lead to any kind of behavior, including rash behavior. So this line kind of conveys, maybe the Speck is considering the act of surrender. Ki, I give up. I don't think I can escape now. Cover, because cover seems to convey some kind of submission. Desperation also shows lack of options, right? All these words, what do they convey? That's what I'm giving you in great detail, each and every word meaning, and then connecting it to the larger meaning. Okay, to accept denotes that whatever fate, ये poet मेरे साथ क्या करेगा, ये मेरे को मंजूर है, because मैं यहाँ से अभी कहीं पर भी escape नहीं कर सकता. Okay, whatever I accorded it of fate. This line puts the power entirely in the poet's hands. कि poet जो भी करेगा, that's what is going to be the end, because there is no way I can escape from here. Accorded emphasizes the poet's ability to determine the fate of the mind. Whatever I accorded, I decided कि उसके भाग्य में क्या होगा, मैं इसको जीने दूंगा या मार दूंगा. Okay, its life is in my hands, my weapon of the pen. So fate signifies the life or death decision that the poet holds, and he can either kill the mind or let it escape and let it live on. So the poet, so basically the Speck, the might has exhausted all the options. I'm sorry for this sound which is being created. The might has exhausted all the options, and it has succumbed to the will of the poet, and it creates a sense of mystery as you wonder what the poet will do. Abhi, you have understood what is a position. Now there is a suspense. Will the poet let it escape, or will he kill the mind? रोक दो जी. Okay. I have none of the tenderer than thou collectivistic regimenting love with which the modern world is being swept. So he says that tenderer than thou. What does it mean? Slightly complex phrase out here. It implies overly sentimental love. He says that I don't have the very, overly sentimental love, which is sometimes seen as pretentious, dikhawa, ya hypocritical, which is not true, and it can be annoying, it can be irritating. So this is also a take on the earlier phrase holier than thou, which means behaving in a manner which is superior to others. Okay, sorry, not the earlier phrase. Holier than thou, no? Holier than thou means that, he behaves in a very holier than thou manner. No, ki, main to itna अच्छा हूं, बाकी सब बेकार हैं. There are a lot of people in our country who behave like that. So, I am so good, rest of them are all nikamma log. Here, it is the same than thou phrase which has been used, but used with tenderer. That, I am not given to having too many tender kind of overly sentimental kind of feelings. Collectivistic regimenting love. It suggests a love that prioritizes a collective good over individual freedom. Collective good, कि जो society के लिए अच्छा है, collective good for everyone, than individualistic freedom. कि, it should not be like it helps only the person who lives in flat number 2. It should be good for people who are living, all the 20 people who are living in all the flats, not just for one person or two persons. So it is suggesting a love which kind of potentially restricts personal choice. Regimenting means strict control, that you know, obviously. So the speaker is the poet is distancing himself from both these kinds of love. I am not into that sentimental love either. I am not into something which kind of restricts personal choice. Okay, so I am not because collectivistic regimenting love, it is kind of indicating a love which focuses on collective good rather than individual good. So in that sense, it restricts the personal choice. So he's saying that I am not excessively tender-hearted, nor would I regulate my empathy based on what others would think. I will not think कि बाकी लोग क्या कहेंगे. It's not like a collective general body meeting कि उसके basis पे होगा. I'm not sentimental, but I would decide on the basis of what my mind thinks, with which the modern world is being swept. This line emphasizes the poet's stance as separate from a prevailing trend in the modern world. जो दुनिया में हो रहा है उससे अलग उसकी सोच क्या है? What is the poet thinking? So the thought is that the tenderer than thou and the collectivistic approaches might be becoming very common, while the poet chooses a very different path. So he's neither this nor that, but he chooses his own path. But this microscopic item now, since it was nothing I knew evil of, I let it lie there till I hope it slept. So he's saying microscopic, once again, it shows the very tiny size of the mite. And having rejected the prevailing trends in the world at that point in time, so the poet feels a certain sense of sympathy, empathy for that poor microscopic item, which is the mite. And the exclamation mark which he has put at the end of this line, he wants to emphasize this emotion that, I feel empathy and sympathy and pity for this little mite. So this suggests a change of heart. And, he's understanding the value of that little life. Choti si jantu hai, but he values that little life. Since it was nothing I knew evil of, I let it lie there till I hope it slept. So it shows a newfound respect for life. Okay. And it justifies the poet's decision to spare the life of the mite. Evil here does not necessarily mean malice, but harm or danger. Evil does not mean, malice, ki kuch galat hai, but he's talking about danger out here or harm. So the poet is acknowledging the Speck has not done anything. कि उसने कुछ ऐसा काम नहीं किया जिसकी वजह से उसको मारना पड़े. It's not done anything which kind of deserves that I should be killing the mite. So he's basically showing an act of mercy, that he's being merciful towards the mite. I let it lie there till I hope it slept. That this is kind of conveying to you what the poet's decision is, what he decides to do with the mite. So let it lie there means non-intervention. I will not intervene. He will allow it to be unharmed till I hope it slept means that he wishes that because it has seen that the mite is trying frantically to escape and it will feel tired. So he wants it to rest there and sleep. So it's a very gentle kind of imagery. I hope, it is a very gentle imagery that Robert Frost has used in this particular line. Then, and it is a lot of hope also. I have a mind myself and recognize mind when I meet with it in any guise. So he says, the poet is acknowledging in the last 4 lines, he's acknowledging his own intelligence and ability to recognize intelligence in others. In this case, the mite. He's able to recognize intelligence in the mite, the way it tries to save its own life. And this, it reinforces what the mite did in the previous lines. Mind when I meet with it in any guise. So this line connects to the previous one and expands on it. And the poet is recognizing intelligence irrespective of its guise, as it in the way it looks, the size, etc. And it could be a human being, it could be any form of creature, or it could be any form, even a display of independent thought. It could be a poet or a novelist writing about a new idea which may not have been discussed before by anyone. So it is a slightly hatke kind of an idea that also he kind of recognizes and respects. Okay. So he's now making it a larger thing. No one can say how glad I am to find on any sheet the least display of mine. So he says, I mean, this kind of convey the speakers having a lot of pain in. Let me finish this off. These lines convey the speaker's joy and deep satisfaction at encountering intelligence, even in the most unexpected of places. On any sheet, it means, it doesn't just mean the paper sheet. It means it could be anywhere. It could be in someone's painting, it could be in someone's writing, it could be in someone's music, right? And it could be even someone reading something and finding intelligence in it, right? So it could be, the canvas could be different for different places. It's not, this is not just talking in a literal sense. The least display of mind emphasizes the importance of recognizing intelligence, even in the most basic of life forms like the mite. And the use of the word sheet connects to the act of writing at a very literal level. And also it connects to the intellectual pursuit of creating art, anything, So it is the canvas. It's a blank canvas while the painter paints. That for him is the sheet. So the deep explanation is that the line conveys that the poet values intelligence, and finds pleasure in its discovery, both within himself and also the world outside, which includes this tiny mite also. Okay. So with this, we come to the end of this thing. It's not a very complex poem, but if you understand the basic themes, and I will go through the themes also. The poetic devices quickly. Personification with suspicion of my pen. It paused. It seemed too tiny. All this I will put in the Instagram and WhatsApp notes. It seemed too tiny to have room for feet. Breathe life into the tiny creature. But I'll explain it while I'm going through. This is fine. Metaphor. The entire poem is a metaphor for life, and this is very important. Okay. To stop it with a period of ink, another one. The period signifies an end, making it a dark and humorous way to represent the act of killing, squashing the insect. A lot of imagery has been used. The white sheet so wide, the speck would have been beneath my sight. All this is a lot of imagery. Enjambment, because the sentences continue without a regular punctuation mark. So it creates a sense of flow, and it kind of shows the thought process, the observation of the poet while he's looking at it. Oxymoron, a considerable speck itself is an oxymoron, because speck is insignificant while considerable suggests some kind of importance. So this sets the stage for the poem's exploration of how even the smallest things can have significance. Then the poetic device of symbolism, the will to survive, the insignificance we often feel in the vast world, and the importance of recognizing intelligence regardless of its form. Like anyone can show their respective intelligence. What are the themes? It's written in a conversational tone, as we realized. He's the narrator, the poet is talking directly to the reader, and it's a very conversational tone. So it kind of, you relate to it at a very simple kind of level. The value of life, however small, I've explained that in great detail. The power of observation, that he's able to observe that there is a tiny mite which is trying to make way through the vast paper. Okay. Then the theme of intelligence and recognition, that you recognize intelligence even in different kind of creatures, and in recognizing the power of the mind, a capacity for intelligence, for thought, for action, the willingness and the urge to survive in the tiny mite. And it kind of shows an intellectual capacity and an appreciation. The power of choice, the poet's power of this over the speck, that if I want, I can squash you and kill you right now and here, right? But he chooses a different approach, right? Because he shows that there is some responsibility that comes with power. I can give you 10 out of 100 marks and fail you, but a better approach would be for me to help you get better and probably get a 50 out of 100. So that 40 which I help you get, that's my power. That is something using power in a responsible manner, right? If I just decide to punish you, that's the easier way to do. That is something which Frost displays in this particular poem. And he shows respect. It shows empathy for another living being. Mortality and survival. Obviously, the constant struggle of the Speck for survival underscores the universal theme of mortality, that all of us do not want to die. By showing compassion to the Speck's desire to life, the poem indirectly prompts readers to reconsider their own mortality, that all of us will go at one point of time or the other. It's about a week ago, somebody had written, Sale Hindi mein bola kar, kind of a thing. Without realizing that I'd also do my video subsequently in Hindi. But I just thought about it. Here is somebody, a 15-year-old, who thinks probably he's going to be 15 years all his life. I was also 15 at one point in time. But that whole thing of, using the concept of aging as a weapon to abuse and disrespect someone, to mock someone, to make someone feel smaller. Not that I care. I don't give a damn. But the whole point is that, that's what people need to realize. And that's what is the larger message from this particular poem. So with this, we come to the end. I hope you have understood this, and God bless you. Thank you very much for watching. As I said, the short notes will be available on Instagram and WhatsApp channels. Thank you very much.